So Roger suggested this technique, which I said I would get to the technique. He said, the next time you find yourself embroiled in an argument with someone that's contentious and uncomfortable, say, institute the following rule. You don't get to respond to the person's claims until they've exhausted that particular claim, and this does presume to some degree that you're dealing with a good faith actor, even if they feel differently than you do. You don't get to respond until you have recapitulated their viewpoint and summarized it in a manner they find acceptable. That's so treacherously sneaky, that rule. Because what it means is, you have to demonstrate that you attended to what they say closely enough and carefully enough to, first of all, act out validation of the idea that they have an opinion worth attending to. So that's a big deal. Eh? People really like being paid attention to. There is nothing people like more than that, unless they have something to hide. And so you're called upon to, first of all, summarize what they said, which is not an easy thing, right? Because it means you have to, and sometimes it's somewhat incoherent and emotion-laden, especially if it's in the course of an argument. So you have to sort of strike right to the quick. It sounds to me like this is the point you were making. And then you lay out the point, and then you see they have to be happy with your summary. They have to be pleased with it, which means that you're doing exactly the opposite of straw-manning the argument, quite the contrary. And you're doing them a favor in some sense by reducing it to the gist, because that's actually an incredibly complex cognitive operation. When you listen to someone very, very carefully, and especially if they express themselves for a while, and you say to them, well, it sounds to me like this is what you're saying, what you're doing is taking a tremendous amount of emotionally laden material, a lot of it unnecessary in the final analysis because of the ensuing synthesis, and offering them a synthesis, which is a great thing to do, especially if they're happy to accept it, because that also means that you did listen to them. So you signified that they were worth attending to, and then you listened to them enough to actually understand what they were saying, to try to understand it, and then you did understand it. And then they're way happier with you, even if you're arguing with them, because at least now they know they can rely on you to be a reliable listener, and that you're not trying to, you know how it is when you're arguing with someone, there's a part of you that really wants to win. It's like, I'm right, you're stupid and wrong. And so the best way for me to demonstrate that is to warp and bend your argument in some, make it trivial in some way it isn't, especially if it's directed to some degree at like elucidating my character flaws and to minimize you in doing so. And if you do that, of course, well, that's not a great road to peace unless you're willing to bring a big club to the argument, and many people are. And instead of listening and trying to make peace and sort things out, they'll use all sorts of subtle forms of suppression in their ensuing dialogue just to keep everything, you know, under the rug or in the closet. I wouldn't recommend that as a medium to long-term strategy, especially if you're trying to bring peace to a household. You have to go through this horribly painful process of listening to the people around you tell you what they think of their lives. And if you do that, then, well, maybe you can all come to a place that is characterized by something approximating genuine peace. And I would say that even psychophysiologically, you know, I mean, when there's tension in a household and multiple, what would you say, systems of value operating simultaneously, there's a tremendous confusion about what should reign supreme, right? And you think, well, nothing has to reign supreme. We can all have our diverse opinions. No, you can't. Not if you're going to live together in harmony. There has to be some overarching structure that unites you. What else is a family if it's not an overarching structure that unites you? Now, within that, there can be tolerance and even appreciation for necessary individual differences, and obviously there should be, but that doesn't mean there's not a higher unity that the entire organization, let's say, is striving for in some manner, and not only striving for, but pining for, or even dying for. And I don't use those words lightly. Like, the absence of that incorporating higher structure is a felt sense of catastrophe on the part of the members of the family. They're always at each other's throats. They're interfering with each other's goals. They can't listen. They're in a chronic state of hyper-arousal because they don't know what to do ever. They're hopeless because no goals have been clearly defined, and we experience almost all our hope in relationship to defined goals.